This morning's reading is taken from Genesis, chapter 12, beginning at the first verse. The call of Abram. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abram travelled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on towards the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Many of you will already know who I am, but for those of you who don't, I'm Lynn Hayler, and I've just joined the team here at Harn Hill as part of the residential team. We've just moved in along with my husband Steve, who was supposed to be on the sound desk, but is off doing something else, so it's not Martine, okay? Steve is around somewhere. You will see him on other occasions. We've just started in the last month. I'm here on team. Steve is volunteering, though you might not know the difference between us, really, because he's around quite a lot. So I just thought I'd just say a bit about us. For those of you who don't know us, apologies for all those of you who do. We've just returned to the area in the Cotswolds. It's a familiar place to us. We were here just over 5 years ago when I was curate in the South Cotswolds team and working with people like Tim and John and the clergy around. At that point, Steve was still serving in the Air Force. Just before then, we'd been based at Shrivenham. So actually, we've been in the area for quite a little while. But then about 5 years ago, following my curacy, I moved up to northeast Derbyshire to a group of 5 parishes, a single team, a bit like here, where I was team vicar. So had a really interesting 5 years up there, of course, with COVID and all the rest of it. And was called back to here, really quite clearly and in some ways unexpectedly as well. And it's a delight to be back here, back in the area and back amongst friends as well. We're actually in our 14th home since we married over 30 years ago. This is home number 14. So we're quite practiced at packing and unpacking. Actually, that's not strictly true. We're not very experienced at packing because normally we have a packing service in. But we are pretty good at unpacking. And it's tempting to think that there's a bit of a phrase in the military that you go where the military sends you. But actually, I'm not sure that's entirely true, because in all of those 14 moves that we've had over the years, God has certainly been in them and has called us into things as we have travelled round. We have been always in the right place at the right time. And we're certain now we are in the right place at the right time. Abraham, that really familiar story of Abraham. You'll have known the passage, I'm sure, pretty well. It's one you've heard many times. A man of God, called by God, to go. Go to a place where you don't know. No idea how you're going to get there and where the journey is going to take you. Abraham, at the time of his calling, just for a bit of background, he lived in ancient Mesopotamia, which is actually around about Iraq, where Iraq is at the moment. Part of the region known as the Fertile Crescent back then. He was, at this point of the story, he was part of a semi-nomadic tribe, a family, son of Terah. And we see him being called by Yahweh, the God of Adam and Eve, the God of Noah, the God of Terah. God calls Abram. And he sets out from a place called Haran, a place of civilization, leaving behind him all that he knew. His wider family, his friends, his culture, all that was familiar to him, to set out into the great unknown, faithfully responding to God's call on his life. Now, we might think, oh, great, I've had those calls in my life or whatever, and, I don't want that right now, thanks very much, because, I'm getting on a bit, I'm getting on a bit. Lord, I don't need any more new calls in my life, thank you very much. I've done enough of that. We just want it, just a bit quieter now, thanks very much. Forgetting that Abram was 75. 75! That's crazy, quite frankly. 75 he was. Proving the point, you're never too old to be called by God to anything and anywhere. And so he set out. He was quite established by this time. He wasn't a young man going off into the unknown, part of the great adventure, as we do in our younger life. No, he was all settled and set up, thank you very much. I've got my wife, and I've got all my servants and my large amounts of livestock. I'm quite happy, thank you, Lord, here. I'm okay. But no, he leaves with his wife Sarah. He responds to the call, his nephew Lot, servants and livestock. There's a big entourage of them. This isn't a small little family group just meandering around the wilderness. It is a large tribe. Out into the unknown, into the wilderness. He leaves behind a life of security, a life of certainty. I'm sure he pretty much had it all planned out, where he was going to retire to and what he was going to do. He had it all sorted. But he's called to the life of a nomad, wandering, uncertain of his destination. And part of that call, I believe, was to lay down and leave behind all that had gone before. Lay it down, leave it behind. Well, in moving here, Steve and I had to, quite frankly, lay down and put down quite a lot of stuff. In our 14 moves that we've had, the first 13, we always seem to move into bigger and bigger properties. So that's fine. You just kind of expand to fit the space, don't you? All familiar with that? More rooms and cupboards you've had, you somehow, by the time you leave, you think, how have I filled all this place? How have I filled all this space? This is ridiculous. Anyway, the accommodation here is very lovely, but it's not quite as big as some of the other properties that we have lived in. That would be fair to say, and it is very lovely. And we've been amazed, really, how much we had accumulated over the last 30 years. And you would have thought, wouldn't you, after 13 moves, you'd had a clear out every 13 years, every move. But no, apparently not. We still had a whole load of boxes that, in fact, I don't know about you, but maybe you've not moved before and you've just got attics and things. But we have those boxes when we arrive somewhere. We think, I'll just put that in the attic for now. And then when we come to move again, we get it back out the attic again. I think I've absolutely no idea what's in here, quite frankly. But I've now moved it 5 times, and it seems to be part of me. This time, we literally went through every single item that we owned and had to put it into one of 3 places. Were we going to bring it with us here? Were we going to leave it in storage? Otherwise known as my mother-in-law's house. Thank you very much, mother-in-law. We're very grateful. Or were we going to take it either to recycle or to sell or some other way of disposing of it? We wondered how this whole thing of downsizing would go. And actually, at the beginning, when we kind of accepted the call and accepted Kate's offer, I was like, oh my goodness, Lord, what have we done? I have no idea how I'm going to get through downsizing all this stuff. And it kept me awake a bit at night, thinking, what bits of furniture can we fit? All of that sort of stuff. To my surprise, we actually quite enjoyed the experience. It actually felt quite cathartic. And we let go of quite a few things. We resisted the temptation to put everything we didn't need into storage, and we made some, quite difficult decisions about what we were going to get rid of. I finally got rid of all my university notes from several years ago that I had faithfully carried around in a box in the attic down in, the story. Some time ago, as a church up in North East Derbyshire, we reflected on the themes of the John Mark Comer book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with it. If not, I can thoroughly recommend it. And of course, I was expecting it to be about keeping Sabbath and slowing down and getting a balance of life, all those sorts of things. And indeed, he touched on lots of those. They were important things to explore. But the theme that really caught my attention and I was drawn to was about our belongings. He talked quite a lot about our possessions. And I'm thinking, what's our possessions got to do with the elimination of hurry? How do we get rid of that whole busyness and overwhelming feelings that we have in our life? What's that got to do with what I own? And he talked about our possessions taking up a lot of our life. Really? How is that? Well, they don't only take up space, as we know, but they also take up some of our headspace. How does it do that? And I've realised that as we've downsized, because our things need looking after. In fact, they need buying. Then they need a place to live in your home. Then they need maintaining and keeping and storing. They need caring for. And actually, the more you have, the more stuff you need to look after and maintain and store and all the rest of it. Especially if you've got more than you need. We definitely had more than we need. That was for sure. I've probably still got more than I need. Well, I certainly have in my wardrobe, and that's another conversation. And actually, it's been quite cathartic working out what we really needed and what we needed to let go. And actually, being in our new home, life does feel quite a bit simpler and quite a bit more relaxed because I haven't got stuff everywhere. I can now mainly find things. Well, that's not strictly true. I'll still lose my keys. But, I can find things easier. Abram had to put things down, laying them aside, so that he could follow God's call to pilgrimage, to be a pilgrim, to determine to follow God wherever he led him and whatever he was called to. And of course we know that in his calling, Abraham was made some astonishing promises by God. Let's just remind ourselves of those. He was promised that he'd become the father of a great nation, that his own name would become great, that he would be blessed and he would be a blessing to others. So a quick aside on that then, just want to talk about this blessing bit. That's not really part of it, but I love the idea that God delights in blessing us in so many ways. And we are to rejoice and give thanks for all those blessings, the ways in which God grants us favour and is gracious to us. And maybe you can think of those moments where God has shown you his favour and his grace. But actually, I love how God says, actually, I'm not only going to bless you, I'm blessing you because I want you to be a blessing to others. I want you to pass the blessing on. Don't just keep it lying back on the chair going, oh God, this is great. Thanks very much. I'm just loving this whole blessing you're giving me. God is saying, pass it on. That's the point. Pass on those blessings that other people can be blessed through you. That was the whole point of God calling the Israelites. They were to be a blessing to the other nations around them. And we all know that story didn't end well, quite frankly, but that was the point. They were supposed to be a blessing to the others. Abraham trusts God's promises to him and he sets off in pilgrimage. The journey begins. He didn't know where it would end and he didn't know how he was going to get there, but he trusted God simply for the first step. I'm going to step out, God, wherever you're going to call me. And actually, that place between starting the journey and reaching its conclusion can be a difficult place, a place of transition, a liminal place, a place that is in between the start and the end, between setting off in hope and arriving at the place of promise. Thankfully, most of us aren't called to leave our place and move away. But we may find ourselves in other in-between places, where there is uncertainty and we're not sure, where we've started a journey because things change in life and we find ourselves in a new season, a new job, a change of circumstances, sustaining a loss of some kind. And we feel we are in an unknown and unrecognisable place which we weren't expecting. We can feel lost and at sea. But like Abraham, we are called to trust for the journey, to trust for that in-between place where we've set off, but we don't know where it's going to end. We haven't arrived at the place of promise. We're called to trust God for the journey, to trust that he will be with us in that space, and to trust that he will fulfill all his promises to us. Just think about Abraham, those promises that were made to him at age 75. You will become a father of a great nation. Don't be ridiculous, Lord. I'm 75 and we're childless. It's not going to happen. How long did Abraham have to wait? 25 years. 25 years for that promise to be fulfilled. I don't know about you, but when I'm praying, I find 25 days quite long. Let alone 25 weeks, 25 months, but 25 years. He hung on to God, trusting that that promise would be fulfilled. I'm sure there were lots of doubting going on in that time. And actually, some of those stories of Abraham, we think, oh, Abraham, did you not notice where God was with you during that time? He clearly didn't. He had 3 visitors. They were angels. He didn't seem to recognize those to start with. Other encounters that Abraham had and just didn't recognize God's presence with him. We can sometimes miss God's presence with us in the liminal space, in the in-between space while we're waiting. We fail to notice his hand at work. We need to be alert for the signs of God with us, journeying with us at work in those spaces in between. Maybe it's simply the text from a friend who says, I'm here for you. I'm with you. Maybe there's unexpected moments of peace when you think, why do I feel peaceful in this situation when there's a whole storm raging around me? Or maybe those numerous God incidences that just catch us by surprise and we go, oh, oh, that's weird. How and why did that happen? God is with us on the journey. Abraham was called out to step out into a journey, into, I suspect, the most amazing adventure of his life. It took courage and it called for trust in a loving and faithful God. He had to let many things go. And he travelled in faith, not knowing where he would end up. But he left on the journey with some incredible promises ringing in his ears, all which were fulfilled. He did become the father of a great nation. His name became great. I'm talking about him now, several thousand years later. And along the way, he received countless blessings. Can we trust too that in whatever situation we find ourselves in, whatever liminal or in-between space that we find ourselves, that God will be faithful, will be with us on the journey, on that road? Amen.